Okay, we're live on YouTube. Tweet that out. Switch on the USB. On hold. Hello there, Hawkeye fans. Welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. I'm Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic, recording on Thursday, October the 27th, 9:11 a.m. Central Time. That was exact. Usually I do a round. I round it up or down, but I went exact today. Hi out there to everybody on the YouTube feed. Be nice to each other in the chat room. Be nice to us. And we're going to talk a lot of Hawkeyes today, obviously. It's the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Scott, how are you? How was the trip to Columbus?
The trip was okay. Went out. It was a little worse coming back just because of some light travel issues. Nothing worth complaining about. The game fit that just last second of my life there. That sneeze was the game in itself. So it was it kind of went as expected to some extent. I mean, we thought that the defense would play hard, and it did, and we thought that the floodgates would open on them eventually, and it did, and the offense struggled even worse than I thought it would. So here we are, 3-4, and still in a significant part of the season left, but it's kind of at a crossroads. I don't know what you think, but I'm kind of feeling like if there's any must-win game this year, it's this one for a lot of reasons. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, no question. If you're looking at Big Ten games this season, this is the easiest game on the schedule on paper. We'll dive in a little bit here on this. It's Northwestern, and anybody who follows Iowa football and Northwestern football for that matter understands that there are some skeletons, ghosts that seem to happen when these teams get together. We'll talk more about that in a bit. We should probably start, Scott, with the, for lack of a better term, off-field conversations and topics that are being discussed right now in Hawkeye land. And it's, I think it kind of started at Illinois with David Eichholz's question that got the response of, we won 10 games. You may have noticed we won 10 games last year. And then it continued that, what was it, Wednesday, we got Brian Ferentz of the week after that, the bye week, and he threw out the what's the upside in terms of changing quarterbacks. And then we had Saturday with the Columbus Post-Dispatch, Cleveland.com. Cleveland.com asked Kirk some poignant questions about nepotism, his offense, and he took exception with that and followed that up this week on Tuesday's press conference. And if people haven't seen any of this, I'm probably repeating it for a lot of people that are listening, but just wanted to kind of tie this together. Kirk basically, I don't want to say lashed out, but countered what was asked of him and written about him. And I think what the discussion has been so far, the last few days, I think people have left out that actual column. Kirk read that, obviously, and he's human. And I think some of the, frustration and defense mechanisms that for him is what was written in that thing, not only what was asked of him. So follow that up yesterday, Wednesday, October 26th. He issues a statement, and I'm going to say this, and maybe I'm completely off on this, but he hired a PR firm for a reason, and the release that came out as an apology to the Iowa media read like a PR release. And then he followed that up on his radio show last night. And at Scott Docterman on Twitter, you can see the video of him talking with Gary Dolphin about what he was apologizing for. And he kind of qualified the apology by saying he didn't like the tone of of how the questions were asked of him. So that's kind of where we are on this, Scott. It's a lot of drama, but that's the type of, the type of stuff that goes on when a football team is struggling. If I was 6-1 or 7-0 right now, we're not talking about any of this.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, it's just all roses and sunshine, except for about 15 to 20% of the people who are bottled up because they can't wait to bitch. But that's what happened last year when they were 6-0 to start, right?
Yeah.
But I think when you see, I mean, this is perfectly the perfect crap storm, if you will, of the confluence of so many issues that it's all coming together. And it's no, in so many different ways. I mean, as you said, the Illinois post game, and that was pretty strong. I mean, there are a lot of very strong questions, and as much as people want to get on the Iowa media for being docile, even before that, I asked Kirk about whether he would make changes during the season, and he got kind of a little taken aback by that. And the thing is, I have looked at I'm pretty laissez-faire when it comes to stuff like this. Yeah, there are some cringeworthy moments, but I don't have a problem with any of it. I don't have a problem with any of our questions. I know people seem to think that we take it easy on Kirk. Well, I think the thing is we have a working relationship with him, just like everybody at Iowa, and so the tone is probably what people think of as soft, as opposed to prosecutorial, or hey, what people want after a loss when they don't play well is they want Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson on the stand. I want the truth, and you're not going to get it. We're not going to be that way. We're professionals, and we do, just like we had to cover the team when it was 6-0 last year, and then won the division title. We've got to cover them in good and bad, and mediocre and okay. So we're going to ask questions. We always say the answers are what you don't like. Last week in Columbus, Doug Lesmere, who I've known for 15 years at least.
Yeah, it's not some guy from a website that just showed up, and was looking to make his headlines.
Exactly. And people have wondered about an agenda or something. No, let's put it in perspective. Doug was the former FWAA president of the Football Writers of America Association. He's one of the most respected journalists in the country. He covers Ohio State and other topics for Cleveland.com. And it is an issue that I think most people recognize, that Iowa has statistically the worst, not only the worst offense in the country, but the worst offense in Big Ten play over the last 25 years. In fact, there are only 5 offenses in FBS that have been worse over that period than Iowa's currently. And who's running the show? It's Kirk Ferentz. When you see Paul Chryst get fired, when you see Scott Frost get fired, when you see Indiana and Rutgers change assistants and fire them, and other schools do the same thing, and Iowa continues that's the bottom of the bottom, continues to languish in this and look as poorly as it did, and as poorly organized and coached and play called, and 6 turnovers and just a horrendous outing. That's going to lead to a lot of topics. And likewise, if somebody came to Iowa and played that way, I might even ask those questions and write about those topics too. So it's fair game. It's all fair game to everybody. This is big boy football. This isn't just mom and pop. This isn't Solon going to Sioux City and the Sioux City Journal blasting Solon. This is Big Ten football. So the directness in which Doug asked those questions was a little bit, took everybody a little bit aback, but not by much. I thought it was fine. I didn't see any problem with it. And I really didn't see any problem with Kirk I thought he was a little sensitive, maybe, somewhat passive aggressive.
You talking Saturday, or are you talking Tuesday?
Tuesday. I thought his response was a little passive.
Because there was a little bit of an exchange there. Well, you were there in Columbus, and I watched the video, where I think Doug said, you guys have the worst offense in the country. And Kirk said, I noticed. And there was a little bit of snarkiness back and forth during the questioning. And that's kind of what I noticed too. But Kirk is somebody who's snarky. if he doesn't like the question. We've all been on the other end of that. I thought the response to David Eichholt was snarky when he said, you may have noticed we want. So if he's worried about tone and snarkiness, it cuts both ways.
Right.
So what he said last night on his radio show about tone, he needs to look in the mirror too. Yeah. And again, I'm with you. I don't have a problem with what Doug did. I don't have a problem with what Kirk did Tuesday in responding to it. I think he would have been better off not responding to it on Tuesday because what it did was it was a bad look for him, one, and then two, anybody who didn't see the column that Doug wrote, he just brought the attention back to it again. So it was not, and then he's got an issue apology yesterday. Well, what's he apologizing for? Oh, it's a column? I hadn't seen that. I'm going to go look at the column again. Then he goes on his radio show. It's just, he's not letting a story die that could have at least slowed down a little bit. And now it's continued from Saturday and we're already on Thursday.
And kind of the issues that's represented this program this year, most, on the field mostly, but a little bit off the field. And certainly now it's all really self-inflicted. The exchange on Saturday is something that goes on. And again, the tone was different than what we usually do because very rarely is it that direct with a coach from Iowa. Because again, we have to cover them on a daily basis. It's different when you're doing that, and it's a respectful tone. There is some snark, no question. But I think in response to David Eicholt's question at Illinois, had I asked that question, not sure that I get the same kind of level of snark, but there's a little bit more mutual respect over time. However, Kirk's, he should have just let it go, not said anything Tuesday. Should have let the apology stand. And then he probably shouldn't have asked to go on the radio show. Now, he was trying to explain why he felt the way he did. I get it. I don't have a problem with any of it because I'm not, it doesn't bother me, either way. But I'm like, okay, so we had a problem with the tone. I get the directness. It was 54-10. He hated it. It was at the end of a press conference. He was mad. But that's just the way it works. That's the way this system, we ask questions and it's kind of funny to see some fans, not all, but some fans who are have been very, very critical of us over the years of, we don't ask the tough questions. And then they either A, loved what he did on Saturday, or B, hated it and thought it was unprofessional. And it's just this, everybody's on a different avenue. And I think it's all like all sides. It's like a big circle fight. But the real bottom line for Iowa is this good? Is this healthy? Does this get the attention off the players? Does it do what Hayden used to do when he'd attack Jim Ecker or Mark Hansen or any of the others back in the 90s and the 80s and kind of deflect off his team? And does it kind of put the onus on himself? I don't think it's intentional the way Hayden did it, but it might work actually.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too, and it's a good point. And I was thinking to myself, what is the crux of all of this? And we talked a little bit before we started recording at why these questions are being asked. And that's more when you peel away this drama on the outside, what Doug asked and then what he wrote about is what the issue is. And that is nepotism.
Yeah.
And what is going on here? And he talked to Gary about this too. And that's another layer of this I'd like to talk about too, what Gary said publicly a couple times about who is and who isn't Brian's supervisor here, which I am not a legal, I don't have any, even an ounce of knowledge when it comes to the law, but interested in hearing, because I know you follow this a little bit better than me. But let's first say the reason that this is being written is, and Scott will get into more of how historically bad this offense is. What it is it's a long tenured head coach who hired his son as offensive coordinator, then doubled down, making him the quarterback coach last offseason. The narrative was they were going to be better, simplify things. There was going to be a quarterback competition, all the thing. And I'm just trying to go back here to kind of get to where we are now. And if you're on the outside, like Doug is looking in, your view is if this offensive coordinator was Brian Smith, he probably doesn't have a job at this point. So then the nepotism question comes in. And that's what he was pretty harsh in the column. And Kirk had to have read that. And that's really what he's upset about. More, I think, than the questioning is that he and Brian are painted in a corner here. They have to battle themselves out of this corner because they have become a national punchline.
Yeah. And they've been a laughing stock since the first game, and they haven't been able to get their way out of it. There hasn't been the growth. There hasn't been the strides that you want to see out of your offense and what your expectations were. I mean, and I'm not even going to, I'm not going to justify even what happened back in against South Dakota State, but at least in that game, in the Iowa State game, they only had one scholarship receiver available in Arlen Bruce. I mean, so they were significantly limited in personnel and in scheme when you're trying to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that, but there hasn't been that level of growth. There hasn't been the offensive line, which I wrote about today, is the worst part. I mean, because that's supposed to be the backbone of this offense and a lot of times this team, and yet it just seems to be running in place. There's not been, maybe they've made strides since camp, but other teams make strides too. So it's not like, your performance is up here and theirs are just kind of languishing. I mean, other teams get better. So, but I think the level of aggravation that fans have that has spilled over and permeated through this program, dates back to last season. Everybody saw how bad that team was. It wasn't offensively. I'm sorry. It really struggled. It averaged 3.4 yards per carry. The quarterback threw 12 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, completed 54 or 55% of their passes. I mean, it was really a bad year offensively. And in the interim, what do they do to improve it? And the mechanisms are there to improve it. That's the issue, that you can go out into the transfer portal and sign free agents and get them in there. Shows nothing. Then Ken O'Keefe gets nudged out. Brian, you're going to take over now as quarterback's coach. And that really set people off because they're like, well, what's his qualification for this? It's a bad offense. And most coordinators would get fired for this. No, he's staying. And he's going to be quarterback coach. And then, as you said, the offense was supposed to be simplified, supposed to be more, everything flowing easier, that there's no, middleman like Ken.
Streamlined. Yes. Streamlined.
Yes. And instead it's like stream spray.
Yeah, the stream has gone down.
And so
reset the internet.
Right. And here we are. Right. Yeah. It's like, our issues, your issues too with your intermediate comp. But, and then then this year has just been an abomination. I mean, it's been epically bad in so many different ways. And, and you take that all in totality at a program like Iowa, and let's face it, it's a Big Ten program. It makes the football program directly makes, $80 million, and indirectly 90+% of the budget is football related. This isn't Coe. This isn't Cornell. This isn't, Liberty High School. This is Iowa football. You're in the Big Ten Conference, and that's your product. And your coach makes $7 million a year. Your offensive coordinator makes $900,000 a year. There's an accountability factor. And right now, having your son do this is the worst case scenario because it's personal. It's not just professional.
Yeah. And you're a father. Mm-hmm. I mean, if somebody's coming after my family, my son, mm-hmm. The natural human reaction is to be defensive. Yes, and I think that's where we are.
And that's why these mechanisms are in place, right. Anti-nepotism policies and stuff. And now that this is a big time situation, and how did they skirt it? By having him report directly to Gary Barta. And This isn't new. Iowa's had these issues coming back from Sam Alford working for Steve
Yeah.
Alford, and Terry Brands working for Tom Brands, um, and I brought those up too, and people are saying, well, it's not even the same thing. Well, you got to put it in the same category.
Yeah.
Who knows? It might happen in a year or two with Connor McCaffrey working for Fran McCaffrey in some way. Maybe it's just as a GA. Maybe it's as a director of ops that like Hannah Bluter does for Lisa Bluter. But all around, it's it's a problem, and it's not one that you can just smooth over. It's not one, even if they have a breakout performance this week, which I suppose they're capable of, it's not going to change anything. That the critical mass is gone on Brian Ferentz. They don't want Brian Ferentz there anymore. And even if they have 5 straight 30-point efforts, they're going to be like, let's just move on. And it's your point about a son. I don't know that I would. I think I would feel worse if I felt like I was forcing my son to stay rather than just let him go, because I wouldn't be able to handle it, that kind of criticism, and I would hate to see my son be so stressed out all the time as Brian is.
Yeah, I wonder where, just from the human standpoint, where things, and I know people aren't going to feel sorry for somebody who makes 7.5 million and his son who makes,
Yeah.
close to 1 million, 900,000, whatever it is. But this can't be good for them as a family to be going through this in such a public manner. And I wonder that, after the season, if it's, we could come back and keep the band together and try to do this again and try to fight through this and prove people wrong. But if it's doesn't work out, how much worse can this get?
I don't know how you could stand it now. I really don't. I don't know why you would want to put this, last year was tough enough for Brian. I do know that. I know there was a lot of issues, but that said, you're not shackled to this position. You can leave. It's not yours, so I think I don't know why you would want to continue to try, because it's a toxic atmosphere. And even if they win their last 5 games and go to a bowl game and even have success at a bowl game, and I'm not predicting that, but even if it happened, this is the boat's out to sea. It's time. It needs to change, and the system needs to change. And the people enforcing the system needs to change. Now, the interesting discussion would be, could Brian take a demotion to say offensive line coach / run game coordinator, probably take a pay cut too? And would that be effective? But knowing Brian and his voice and the way it carries, would that be healthy for the team? Would that be just merely self-serving to Kirk and Brian, or would that have merit and it would be a good thing? I'm probably leaning on no, but I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know how comfortable you would be having been the offensive coordinator, going to be, offensive line coach, tight end coach. Those are his 2 areas that he's familiar with. And then being like a subordinate to somebody that you bring in and who do you bring in? I mean, what would that dynamic look like? And I also wonder, Scott, with the racial discrimination lawsuit out there, how much that ties hands here too. If Brian had that not been there, maybe Brian would have found another job last offseason, or it would be more viable to move this coming offseason. That seems like that needs to be resolved before, because we saw what happened when Urban Meyer hired Chris Doyle. That was more of an extreme, because Doyle was actually, fired for what went on here with the racial bias. But that's part of this equation too. And I'm wondering how much that played into the decision to bring Brian back this past offseason and then make him, the quarterback coach and try to streamline things. It almost seemed like they were in desperation mode almost.
Yeah. I think that was part of it. And I think it was just, okay, this is one way we could do it and maybe it'll be better, and I just don't see it. I didn't see it then, and I don't see it now. That how is it going to be better? Is he going to be able to? You're still working through the same constrictive parameters that this offense has. So that's 20 plus years. It's really about 10 years behind, but it's been in place for almost 25, and that not much has changed. And then you're looking at somebody who hasn't played the position and is now just finally coaching the position and understands his limitations and what he can, as far as fundamentals go and what he can and can't teach. I just don't know that there's really much positives right now. I think if you move him to offensive line coach, I think that area improves dramatically very quickly, because I do think Brian is outstanding in that area, and I'll give him his plaudits there. But I think so, to handle that and can Brian's personality enable a different offensive coordinator, whether it's John Budmeyer to take the reins? Can he work with him and John call the plays and do all that? Or would he overshadow that and kind of, because sometimes you can just be that elephant in the room that just makes everything difficult. I don't know. And so, probably the best thing for everybody involved is a clean break, for Brian, to go and, he can. I'm sure there are a lot of NFL teams that would hire him. We bring up Bill O'Brien quite a bit, but, I talked to Bill and he said he tried to hire him twice, the Texans and with Penn State as offensive line coach. That makes sense if Bill O'Brien gets a gig after this season, after Alabama wins the national title or gets the playoff or whatever, that he goes with Bill and he coaches offensive line, maybe his run game coordinator, and then they just kind of start over, whether that's keeping and retaining George Barnett, or that's changing offensive line coach, whether that's having a new quarterback slash offensive coordinator, and maybe that person wants to bring in their own their own wide receiver coach, which is probable. I think all that should be in play. I mean, at this point, because ultimately the responsibility of Kirk Ferentz is to this program. This program takes precedent over personal and every other issue. And right now, the personal is getting in the way of that ultimate decision.
Yeah, it seems, as you said, that Bill O'Brien would be a possible landing spot for Brian if he were to move on from Iowa. The question for Bill O'Brien will be is if he goes to a college program, he's going to have to clear with people at that college program. Hey, we're bringing this guy in. He's got a lawsuit going against him. He's not been the most popular guy in his fan base. He's he's been talked about nationally as not getting the job done. That makes it a little bit more sticky or tricky, I think, for Bill O'Brien. For me, Scott, I just wonder how this is playing in the locker room. And I'm not going to press players on, what they're feeling, and because I don't think it's fair to them, but they're watching what we're talking about, what's going on the outside right now, and the drama and the criticisms. And I certainly think there's a faction that will rally around that and say, hey, we're going to fight for our coaches. We're going to do whatever we can. And as you talked about, there's a limitation to that based on what they have right now, just from a personnel standpoint. But I also wonder at some point, if the negativity permeates that locker room, particularly if things continue to struggle here. And to your point, that's Kirk's responsibility, or that's the biggest responsibility, is putting these players in the best position to succeed. They're the ones working the hardest. They're the ones putting their bodies on the line every week. That to me is where the focus should be, and what I don't want to say concerned with, but what I wonder how that's going to progress here as we get through the rest of the season, and how those guys are feeling.
Yeah, and I think we noticed it a little bit the other day. I mean, I guess I'd have a different perspective on some of these players that, having kids their age and,
Yeah.
in the last few years, I've really kind of focused and looked at them and, even since 2020 to try to identify their personality and their feelings a little bit more. And watching Arlen Bruce, I was really kind of sad for him because he's been such a jovial, fun guy to talk to, uplifting, I enjoyed having quality conversations with these young men. I mean, they all work hard. We know that. They're all, for the most part, I can't think of very many negative ones that I've dealt with, but to see all that joy, all that fun sapped out of him, it's taking a toll. It just is. And then there's the mental side of things, and I don't want to get into that too much, but the thing that I worry about is confidence wise. And I don't know that Kirk has acknowledged it or will acknowledge it, is that they don't have a voice on the offensive side, except for their quarterback, who may not even be starting, that they can lean on. They don't have leadership that really stands out and stands strong and is vocal and is, they don't have much of that. I mean, every one of their linemen that starts, unless Jack Blum starts Saturday, is an underclassman. Sam Laporta is a senior, and Nico Reganey is a senior. I don't know that they have that kind of, swagger. I mean, they're not captains, and
Yeah.
Spencer does, but performance a lot of times determines that. And players aren't always going to follow the guy who isn't playing very well. And then finally in the backfield, none of the running backs, Monty Potabom is, but he hasn't played real well either. And so I don't know that they have that voice like they do on defense, where you can kind of rally around the family. And so their confidence might be pretty shaken at this point. And you've got to do something to get that back. And it's not about Brian, it's not about Kirk, it's about them. And you've got to put them in a position to succeed as best as you can and limit the drama so they can focus on the things that are most important, which is going out and having fun and winning. And if they don't experience some success on Saturday, it's going to be really bad over the final month of the season.
Yeah, as you said, let's talk a little bit more actual football here. We'll go back and look briefly at Ohio State. We don't have to go over that much. It was kind of what we thought. The defense held 133 yards in the first half, roughly, against Ohio State, which is incredible. And really had CJ Stroud on heels and stuff the running game. They really did a nice job in that first half, but eventually wore down, and the offensive shortcomings were epic. And just from the first throw of the game to the last throw of the first half on the pick six to making the quarterback switch in the second half, and this will kind of lead us into the quarterback discussion as well. But I don't know what the game plan was. I don't know what the approach was to that Ohio State game from an offensive standpoint, Scott.
Me either.
Off a bye week, mind you.
Yeah, I looked at, and I tried to watch some of it, and it's really pointless because
I did the same thing. I tried, but it was like, why do this again?
The only thing I always watch it to confirm personnel groupings, because I do chart those very extensively. And this year it's almost a waste compared to the past.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how often do they run the ball out of 21 personnel versus how often do they run it out of 12? And this year it's just such a disaster that it's it's almost qualified like the COVID year when it comes to this, to figuring that stuff out. I don't know why you keep doing it, but they needed to have a coherent plan. How do you attack a team that's superior to you? How does John Licklider compete with Evan Turner? That's really he doesn't. and they didn't. And it reminded me of that damn game back in 2010 when they played on Super Bowl Sunday. I was there, and you've got John Licklider defending against Evan Turner. And I'm like, National Player of the Year, player probably shouldn't be ever out there, except maybe in an exhibition or something. And when you have that kind of disparity, and that's kind of what we saw offensively. I mean, Ohio State's offense obviously is the best in the country, and Iowa's offense is obviously the worst. But the defense is pretty good too for Ohio State. I just thought that they've got to figure out something that they could try to do to move the ball somehow. And I thought for me, your athletic ability is not even in the same category. You're more like a D3 offense going against a Division I offense. Maybe your best bet is your physicality, and you're not been very good at that, but maybe you can make that your best punch just to limit their athletic part of it. And maybe it's go 3 tight ends, maybe 1 receiver in the game, and just try to hammer them kind of the way you did 9 years ago. It probably won't work, but you know what? Nothing else will either. And instead, first freaking play of the game, you have your quarterback roll to his left, and he doesn't do that very well anyway, or at all. Didn't see the guy, obviously, step right in front of him for an interception. Series or 2 later, a fumble on a sack. He could have just eaten the ball. Pick 6. This is after your defense, after all those turnovers in the first half, and then Torrey Taylor's ill-fated run. All of them, they had the ball inside the 35 4 different times, Ohio State, and they held them to 4 field goals on those possessions. And, they had 1 long drive, but guess what? It's Ohio freaking State. They got players there. And they're down 19-10 with a couple minutes left in the half. What I kept thinking is, don't do anything stupid. Try to get out of the half right now, down 9. It still feels insurmountable, but try to make this respectable, And voila, bad pass across the middle to Tommy Eichenberg, who's now the national freaking player of the week, even though Jack Campbell deserved it more than he did. And pick 6. Alex Padilla comes in and he can't get the snap. Whether it's his fault or Logan's, I think Logan had owned it, but one way or the other. Then you have an interception 2 plays later. It's just a train wreck of epic proportions. I've never seen anything like this. And it goes to everybody involved. And it starts at the top. I mean, if you don't have good management, you don't have good play calling, you don't have good coordination, you're not going to get anywhere when you have an offense like this.
No, and at the end of the game, when all's said and done, it's the most points allowed during the Kirk Ferentz era, and that couldn't be more misleading because you see that and you're like, wow, the defense really sucked. And that just goes to show you how historically bad this offense is, that it could do that to its own defense.
Right. I know. I mean, you think about first play of the second half, Jack Campbell looks like a tight end. He looks like Brian Urlacher out there intercepting a pass, at the 44-yard line of Ohio State.
Incredible play. That's one that goes down as that'll be one of the most, when I look at like just individual plays in my time covering this team, that's up there.
It was tremendous catch that he made. And he's made great plays the last 2 years. He's a guy that I will fight for as first team All-American. He's that good. And then
a Campbell Award finalist too. So right. He does it in the classroom.
Exactly. He is like if you're an NFL team, you not only want this guy to be your starter, starter middle linebacker, inside linebacker for 10 years, but he brings in extra elements to the locker room because he's the John Wayne, the man's man. When he walks in, you recognize. It's like, okay, that's a guy. That's a man. I'll follow that guy anywhere because he lives it and he proves it. And I think the very next play to fumble that snap or to not get it, one of the two, is an utter disgrace. It's almost like, you know what, guys, go to the locker room. We just aren't going to play without an offense today. And And so now you're
Did
stuck.
somebody do a study that said that they would have been better off just punting?
Yeah, that they'd be better off with taking 3 knees and punting.
Yeah.
I mean, how bad is that? And so to me, you how you get yourself off the mat for this, I don't know. Again, watching, there's no confidence among some of the skill position players, receiver probably more than anywhere. How do you get going? Well, that's the challenge, and that's the focus that they've got to put all of their effort into, is seeing how, last year I used the analogy, it's like getting the last couple drops out of the ketchup bottle. This year it doesn't count because you're way beyond that. Now it's about just getting anything positive moving forward. And Arlen Bruce, to his credit, said, the defenders are busting their ass for us. I can't believe we're doing this to them. And of course Campbell was like, I don't need any sympathy, we're out there playing and all that stuff. But I don't know, man. A lot of negativity swirling. Now, I will say this. It's traditionally at this time when you see, this is when Kirk battles back. And this is when Kirk gets pretty damn good. And he's as good as I've ever seen at this. That when shit hits the fan and adversity's at its worst level, all the way through, that's when Iowa really shines. That's when the character comes out. That's when the toughness comes out. And it's right there now, So, will he be the one? Will there be a locker room video of him bawling his eyes out, getting the game ball or something like that? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Let's take a little break here. Let me get this read up. As you guys know, if you've listened to this podcast, and if you haven't, I'm bringing it to you for the first time, but support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. And we will hear from some more of our sponsors here. And Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk some more Hawkeye football, maybe more, try to lift you guys up a little bit more than we have during the first hour or so of this program. And we are back. Thank you to the sponsors. Anybody on the YouTube feed saw Scott doing some type of Danny Terrio dance. And if you don't know who Danny Terrio is, it's probably because you're not 50 like us. Or Scott's almost for you're 50 next year, right?
Yeah, next year.
Yeah. So you'll come into the next stage of old dudism.
Yeah. I watched a movie last night. I decided I wanted to get away from the football aspect, and I watched a movie on Studio 54 with Ryan Phillippe and Nev Campbell and Michael Myers.
I've seen that film.
Yeah. So I'm like, I just gotta get away from this mentally a little bit.
That is a good escape, because that's not anything near what Iowa football is.
Yeah,
Studio
right.
54. So we touched on it a little bit, Scott, but let's use it to get back into the discussion. Ohio State, not a good half for Spencer Petras in the first half. I don't think the coaches had any choice but to make a change there. People, were like, well, was that designed? Was that planned? No. That pick six pretty much said, I don't know how Kirk could go into the locker room and look at his coaches and his offensive players with a straight face and say, hey, we're going to put Spencer back out there again after what we saw. And that's not to say this is all on Spencer. As Scott said, the play calling was very suspect in that first half. But here we are. And I think you wrote about this earlier this week, a rare in-season quarterback competition at Iowa. We kind of had this in 2014, but it never felt like Beathard was going to take over for Rudock in that season. And then it just progressively got worse. And then it was the Tax Slayer Bowl, and that was not good. And then we had what we had after that, some change, so to speak. I'll say for me, and I certainly want your opinion on this. I don't think it was I don't think Alex was put in a position where the odds were good that he was going to succeed. The deck was stacked against him in a major way. So I think you look more at what he did last year and what they've seen in practice, which we don't get to see in terms of how much he's developed since last year. And both Jordan Canzeri and Jovan Johnson kind of agreed. We all agreed on this on the Rapid Reaction podcast Saturday. I think Padilla deserves a chance to start this game, but I have a feeling he won't.
If he doesn't,
and I feel bad for when Spencer runs out there because I think the reaction's not going to be good, and that just gets you off on a bad foot.
I think that would be as bad of a. I think that would be as bad of a move as you'll ever see, and I'm not. You know me. I think the world of Spencer Petras, and I think he is as stand up and accountable of a young man as I've ever seen at this level. At any level, frankly. I think he will be a success in life. But it wouldn't be good for him either at this point. I think it's now time to say, you know what? We're going to give Alex the chance. We're going to see what he can do. We have a lot of confidence in him, just like we had a lot of confidence in Spencer. But the offense has not performed. We need to see if this changes anything. Because when you look at a lot of Padilla's games, he's had some opportunity, but Ohio State and Michigan were his last two against two of the best teams in the country each time, and mop up duty or after an injury and after at the Death Star. Even last year when he had when Spencer got hurt at Wisconsin and he came in, he wasn't. That wasn't a winning situation. If he does anything, it's a miracle. So I think when you throw that out there, and then you look at, okay, how did he do against Northwestern, Minnesota, and Illinois? And Minnesota did okay. It was like 11-24. But he was either instructed to or did anyway throw the ball down the field. And God, just do that. I'll accept watching maybe one accidental long pass. I'll take it. And then Northwestern, he was pretty good, 18-28. And then Illinois, his numbers were bad, but he had 5 drop passes. I went back and watched that game earlier in the summer because that was one that I was going to have Brian kind of talk about, but I kind of ruled it out because Brian was like, nobody wanted to play that day. He looked at every single aspect and it was like, geez. And so they had 5 drop passes. So that's not really on him. And then the Nebraska game that he started, he had the flu. And so did Spencer, but Spencer was in a better position, like by a day or two. So I look at it as it's time to give him his chance. He needs to have this opportunity because you need to understand what you've got coming back next year. Maybe he goes out and he plays really well. Maybe he's ready for this. And maybe in practice, he doesn't have a command or whatever that Spencer has, but maybe he goes out and performs in a game. And you can say, you know what, maybe we can win with this guy. Or it just confirms everything that you thought all along, which is great kid. We could play him if we need to, but he's just not going to win games in the Big Ten on a consistent basis. And then you got to hit the portal. And you need to figure that out with your younger players too. So in my eyes, I think it would be among the worst decisions Kirk Ferentz can make to bring Spencer Petras out now. Maybe you do it later. Maybe it's 2 games.
Like the Nebraska game last year.
Yeah.
If Padilla is not effective, you can always go back to him.
Right. And not to the point where you're having him look over his shoulder or anything, but let's say he's like 1 of 10 with 3 interceptions and you're still in it and it's 10-3 or something. Then, okay, this is why, guys. This is why I've been doing it this way. And then you just kind of say, Alex, at the end of the year, if you graduate, you might want to find somewhere else to go. But I don't think you make it this uneven competition. I think it's time to just turn the page. You know what you have in Spencer Petras. and it hasn't frankly been good enough.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. Even when Alex came in at the end of last year, we were already at the point after the 6-0 start that it was up to the defense and special teams, and that's carried over into this season, where it's to the point now where really you just don't want the offense to screw it up. And I think when you look at these last 5 games, Scott, against teams with a combined record of 17-20, and yes, Northwestern skews that a little bit because it's 1-6. But these, Purdue has the best record of the remaining opponents, and it's 5-3, and just lost at Wisconsin. These are very winnable games. You need to get to a point on offense, again, for the players. They deserve this. Put the offense in a position where you can aid the defense and special teams as much as you can, but for God's sake, stop hurting it to the point where no matter how well they play, you still have no chance. And that's really where they need to be here going into these last 5 games, because they're all winnable, but they're all losable.
Exactly. You could flip a coin on any of these games, including this one on Saturday. I mean, they've beaten Iowa 3 straight at Kinnick.
Yeah, if you're taking Northwestern lightly, you're a fool.
Yeah. It's like you've never watched this series ever before, It's like, how many you chalk up like and I don't even want to go through it, but like the 10 biggest soul crushing losses of the Ferentz era.
Yeah.
You're looking at least a third of them coming to this team in purple, and one thing I looked at was,
and they almost beat you last year.
Right. Well, this is the 8th time they've been a double-digit favorite on Northwestern. The first 6 Northwestern won outright. We're
that's
talking
amazing.
Outright as a double-digit underdog. And then last year they were a double-digit underdog. Iowa won 17-12, but if they would have had a 4.5 quarter game, it would have been 19-17 or something. It would have went the other way. So this is not a series that you ever have. You just as long as Pat Fitzgerald's leading that team, and I don't see how that's never going to happen in the next 20 years. You're just going to have to look over there and say, you're going to get a 4-quarter effort. You're going to have to, even when you're up double digits, you're going to have to figure out a way to just keep them down and fight, because they're going to fight. And so I think this is again, the offense is going to fight.
2020, where Iowa got out to the big lead,
17-0 at home. Now, granted, there was nobody in the stands, and I think if they're up 17-0 at home with a loud Kinnick, don't know that they quite do what they do, but you know what, that turned out. I think
was not a good day for Brian Ferentz.
No, that was one of his worst games, and that was the one where we actually kind of argued in our a little bit in my sit down with him, because I'm like, why didn't you run the ball more? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you had your quarterback throw 51 passes against that defense, and Hankwitz has been coaching against you and your system for 15 years. And he's like, I can't run, you can't run the ball on these guys if you're not able to do it. And this is why. And he'd show me why. And there was a couple of times under his breath, are you kidding me? Run the ball on these guys, but I'm like, when they were down only 21-20, they were playing like they were down 10. And calling plays like they were down 10. And they got a quarterback who's going against, which turned out to be an outstanding defense. And They won the division, and they won the Citrus Bowl, and they damn near beat Ohio State in Indianapolis. So they had a really good team. But they just, like I remember late in that game, Jack Kerner intercepted a pass, and they had the ball like right around the 30 or so. And the play that we watched for a good 20 minutes, just to go through every single aspect of it, was the interception that bounced off Sam Laporta's hands and Brandon Joseph picked off. It was like at the 25-yard line of them. If that ball hits the ground, they at least have a field goal attempt, and maybe they get it and they go up 2. It was a bad bounce. It was bad luck. Still, this is all what you're dealing with. And even in the bad years, they've 2009, Ricky Stanzi, 2010, Dan Purse's come back, and on and on and on and on. 2018, they clinched the West Division title at Kinnick Stadium. So I guarantee you either those numbers or those games will come up this week. So LaShawn Daniels is the honorary captain, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um, Pat Fitzgerald's going to have a good game plan. They usually do. I know Hankwitz isn't there anymore, but they're going to have a good game plan. They made a change at quarterback, which is interesting because the guy they have in there now is more like some of their guys that have caused Iowa problems in the past. I think Iowa's better equipped to handle a quarterback like that than it was 10 years ago. But a little bit different look for them. I still have the utmost confidence in Iowa's defense, but Evan Hull's a player. Skoronski's probably arguably the best player on the field. They've got some other decent guys on the offensive line. They've got some players on defense. So this one is a scary one, I think, for Iowa, just because of how Iowa comes into this game. It's really a good litmus test to where this team is from a mental standpoint going into this game, because it's hard to think of being a lower point coming into a game than where Iowa is at right now, at least in this season's lens. So this is one that is a little scary.
Oh, for sure. And, and to me, the scariest aspect, it isn't really what the defense does. It's what the offense doesn't do, or it's what the offense does to kill itself. It picks, like if there are turnovers like last week, they're going to lose. And if they play turnover free ball, and let's say that the, field position battle is fairly even, then I think Northwestern maybe can get 13 points on Iowa. Two field goals and a touchdown is something that I think they're capable of. That's kind of what happened last year. I think Iowa's capable of that this year. The problem, can Iowa get 17 points? Can Iowa get 20 points? Yeah, but they're probably going to need to force a turnover or two to do it. And but if they fumble the ball, at the 23-yard line and gift wrap them a field goal or even a touchdown, that's going to be tough, because Northwestern, we've seen it. It's kind of like Iowa State, but probably stronger, is that they can put everything out of their minds and just focus on the task at hand, probably because they're so damn smart, that they do it better than anybody. And they do it better at Kinnick Stadium than anybody I've ever seen. So they've got to be cognizant. Now, Brandon Sullivan had a nice game against Maryland. He's going against a much better defense. Evan Hull is a kind of kid you'd love to have if you're Iowa. I'm not saying he's better than LaShawn Williams or Caleb Johnson. I don't know if that's the case, but he just fits what you love about them. And of course, Peter Skoronski, they wanted him from day one, and they would do anything to flip him right now in the middle of the season if they could. But because he'll be the top 15 pick come April.
Yeah, no doubt. This seems like a game, Scott, where Iowa, there's a chance to get the running game going. Northwestern is not good against the run, second worst in the Big Ten, I believe. Yeah. This should be a game where you can establish the run and maybe set up some play action and get the ball down the field. To me, that's the approach here that you want to take. And by running the ball, you give your defense a little bit of a break, and maybe you can get a couple first downs.
Yeah, for sure. If they could, if you had like just goals, and I'm not talking about winning, losing, if there are like two goals that I have for Iowa's offense this week, one is reach 100 yards rushing. They've only done that once this year, which is just
that's amazing.
In fact, they've only hit 80 once this year, and that was Nevada, and two of those were really long runs. So, and they had like 162 yards, but 95 of them were on Caleb Johnson's 2 touchdown runs. If they can get to 100 yards rushing, even if it's 35 carries and it's 3 yards a carry, who gives a shit? You just get there. The other one is, and I dare I say, can you imagine how glorious it would be to watch like a 65-yard touchdown pass? I mean, a long touchdown pass.
I don't know if people with the Kinnick would know what to do with themselves.
I don't either. I mean, this is like going back to Hayden Fry about the first down.
It would help beer sales.
Yeah. I mean, it's like,
let's drink.
well, that's what they should do. Can you imagine every bar in town having a special? If Iowa throws a touchdown pass of 50 plus yards, that you have 50-cent draws for the next 15 minutes or something like that. Oh my God.
I would do it. That is a great promotion.
Because over the last 15 games since their 6-0 start, they have 5 total touchdown passes. And
2 this year, right?
Two this year. And then the crazy part is the defense over that span has scored 4, and then they've had 3 safeties. So the defense and the passing game have the same number of points. The leaders, as far as points go, Jack Campbell and Joe Evans, each with a touchdown and a safety. Wow. Yeah. So, Laporta almost had 2, with the Nebraska overturn, but didn't happen, At this point, when you're approaching game 8 and you have 2 touchdown passes, if you need anything else to say, maybe we need to look at a different quarterback. I think that probably fits.
We've kind of touched on it in a roundabout way throughout our podcast, but all of what we're talking about starts up front. And you have a story on that today, how we've gotten here. Connor Colby starts at right tackle, gets moved inside last week, gets benched, come back. They're in disarray right now on the offensive line. And what do you feel like is going to happen this week? Do we see Jack Plum give him a chance? What's going on here with this unit? Talk about your story a little bit, kind of how we've gotten here, and maybe what can be done in these last 5 games to maybe take a step forward here.
Yeah, Rob, you cover recruiting as good as anybody. And, when you go back, and Iowa's style usually almost every year is that they generally have like a senior or 2 who are NFL caliber players, whether they're draft picks or just they stand out, but they're pretty good. Everybody from an Austin Blythe and an Ike Butker to a Tristan Wirfs and an Alec Jackson type, but you have those guys who are kind of your anchors. And then you have maybe a try-hard or 2, the guys that are from small town Iowa that just work. Maybe they're a walk-on, maybe they're a recruit, but they just get in there, your Kyler Schott type, or your Keegan Render, or, just somebody who really fights. And then they usually have 1 or 2 younger players that, the guys we've seen now, a Connor Colby type, who maybe Connor Colby and Mason Richmond, one might be a starter and the other one might be a rotational guy. And that's kind of been the crux of how Iowa's kind of recycled itself up front for all these years. And then eventually, gets to be a pretty good line, and then they lose. But that they kind of have that cycle. Well, when you look back at the 18 and 19 classes, which were, 5th year and 4th year players, it's whispers, it's ghosts. When you look at, the 18 class in particular, Jack Plum's the only person who's even contributing. And, hasn't started. This year he needed to be one of those good stories, and it hasn't happened. Cody Ince, if he wasn't hurt, would have been one of those good stories. It didn't happen. And then you had, I think, Jeff Jenkins left early. And then the next year you had, Ezra Miller, who we all expected to be a really good player. Now he's at Nebraska and hasn't played yet this year. Noah Fenske's at Colorado. He's a backup center. Justin Britt has been hurt. Tyler Andrews hasn't even cracked the depth chart. And so you needed at least like 2 of those players to start for you. And you don't have any. So then you start looking at your younger players and their development and how they've gotten there. And when you're looking at, Mason Richmond, most years would probably be about somewhere between your 3rd and 4th best lineman, because you'd have like an Alec Jackson or an Ike Bucker or somebody like that, Jordan Walsh. And instead he's manning left tackle. I think he's got like 19 career starts. Connor Colby is a position where he should probably be a rotational redshirt freshman instead of a long-term starter as a sophomore. Guys like Bo Stevens and Tyler Ellsbury, I mean, they're all in that level that have been pushed up because of the attrition level and because of the, lack of development. recruiting issues, all of those things really stunted this unit. And then finally, it's center. This is the second one in a row you had to flip over the other side of the ball. And Logan, I think, has the starter kit to be an outstanding one. But ideally, what would have been better for him and probably for this team would have been if he would have been the second team center last year. And then in there. So I kind of looked at that as kind of the background for this. And so as goes Iowa, so go the offensive line. And that's the biggest disappointment for me for this offense, because I did think that last year, by throwing those guys in there early, they would get enough experience that maybe they would start to click and be a better unit. And then when you reach this part of the season, then maybe they'd have some chemistry, but it's been far from that this year.
Yeah, it's not the strength and conditioning program. I've seen that thrown out there, and it's not affecting the guys on the defensive line. They seem to be developing just fine. This is more just, I mean, there were some plays the other day, Scott, and I know it's Ohio State, where it just looked like they didn't know, the offensive line just didn't know their assignments almost.
Yeah.
Just guys just blowing by them. And that's kind of been the theme this year, where they're giving up, plays where the running backs and the quarterbacks have no chance to run the play because of the offensive line being so leaky. And I don't know, moving forward here, what you can do to kind of patch this up. But I think, 7 games into the season, inexperience doesn't work as well as it does, as you said, back in that South Dakota State game. These guys have played 7 games now, and we're not seeing progress we normally see. And maybe we see that in the last 5 games, and these guys take a step forward and they look, like the Cap One Bowl last year, where it looked like they took a step forward. Of course, the guy in the middle was beating the shit out of everybody, and he's not here anymore. He's doing that in the NFL. So we talk about crossroads for the program. This is really a crossroads for that position.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think that this is, for every reason we've talked about all game, that this is the most important game of the season. And this will set the tone for the whole program in the offseason. If they go to 3-5, they're not going to the bowl game. Let's just not even try to rationalize that or think about that. They have to win. But they also have to win not 12-9 with 4 field goals versus 3 in overtime or something stupid like that. They have to go out and play well. They need to build confidence. And the running game is a part of this. If the running game can get, and not only big runs, I mean, yes, you'd love to see a 35-yard touchdown run by Caleb Johnson, but I think what you really need to see is a 5-yard average. In the fourth quarter, if you're winning, let's say you're winning 13-3, you want to see them drive it 60 yards over 8 minutes, and you're just pounding them and getting a touchdown, punch it in. So you feel like you're building confidence up front. You have to be there right now, because you want to have something to build on. Like, okay, we had a good performance. We have a lot to work on, but man, that felt good, didn't it? And that's what they really need. And if they can't get that this week, they're not going to get it the rest of the year. I mean, Wisconsin has a lot of different fronts they throw at you. They're not a good Wisconsin team on defense, but they're capable. Minnesota will play you hard. Nebraska's not very good either. It could be like a Northwestern type defense, but still, Purdue is, they're okay on defense, but you need to build something. And that's what this one is. If they can pass protect a little bit, if they can run the ball with effectiveness, that is going to be the perfect deodorant for this offense, provided they don't turn the ball over.
Yeah, no question. And if you think of it like, okay, we've, had our face smushed in the mud, because you look at it, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa State are all top 10 defenses coming into this week. So they've had experience against some of the best. So now that the schedule softens up a little bit more, there's really no excuse. You should be better from the games you've played, and it should make it to the point where you can show growth here over the rest of the regular season.
And then you have where they are right now. And then, it's not too early for us to project where they can be in a year from now. And with all this youth and experience and struggle that they've dealt with, it can parlay down the road. You saw it firsthand in Kirk's first few years,
Yep.
playing that young offensive line with a walk-on tight end named Bruce Nelson and a former tight end named Eric Steinbach and a former tight end named Robert Gallery. And damn, they were pretty freaking good. I'm not putting this in that category.
No.
I'm just saying that the parallels are that now you've got a really, really young group that's struggling the way that one did, that really, it was a grind. But once it developed and got better, that by the end, they were pretty damn good. And I think what it does is you look at who you have, and then you look at Caden Proctor coming in January. And I think with Caden Proctor, don't mess around. Okay, if you want to make it a competition, fine. But if he's good enough, you put him on, left side, right side, I don't care. You make him a starter from day one and say, look at this guy. he's our guy. And then then everybody continues to compete, because then it's like, all right, now you've got something. Now you can start building, but it really starts today. It starts Saturday and then next week to make progress, make strides, show growth. And let's face it, George Burnett needs to show it too, because, and I'm not Kirk Ferentz, so I don't have the firing ability, but it's been a rough go these 2 years. Is it on him? Is it just the youth? Is it the inexperience? Is it the injuries? I don't know, but we got to find out, because Kirk has said it a few times that we thought they'd be farther ahead, and that kind of goes to coaching.
Yeah, and who better to evaluate the performance of an offensive line coach than Kirk Ferentz? So I would trust in him being able to evaluate that after the season, depending on what we see the rest of this season, and maybe it's heading in the right direction, and everything comes together in terms of the guys, developing, and George Burnett figuring out how to use those pieces, and all that stuff happens. And that would be the best case scenario moving forward. We saw Deontay Vines get a few reps last week, and he'll conceivably get more this week. What do you think he adds to the receiver core? We haven't seen anything from him, so it's hard to know, I guess.
A competent receiver, somebody who might be able to run a route and catch a pass, and
yay!
Yeah, I know. I don't want to set the expectations like, well, look, we got this guy, but I think now that you have 4 scholarship receivers who have at least been in the system for a couple of years, that I think that it can, Reganey is probably clearly the number one. Bruce has been the true warrior of the group, because he's actually been there. It is only a true sophomore, but Vines had a good camp, and it really cost him. And at least you've got a guy out there who you feel like, all right, well, you recruited him for a reason, and now he's here. And then Brody Brecht brings height, and you just want to see more there. So, maybe that's just get somebody out there that can do something. And hey, if he catches 2 passes for 20 yards, maybe you didn't get that before that. And I think that's just a positive. Right now, they just need to play and try to succeed.
No question. And this is an opportunity. This can be a get right game. And they need to get right. There's no doubt about it. This is the game where, okay, we've had the run of Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State. This is kind of, we can come up for air here, but be careful. Tread lightly with Fitz coming to town. Because I can tell from watching Fitz's press conference on Monday, I think he's relishing this opportunity too, because he's seen Iowa's offense.
Well, exactly. It's like, if you can pin down Iowa's offense, and then they know how to frustrate Iowa's defense. They've done it before, even really good ones. They frustrated them. And it's not like they've blown them out by any stretch, but they know how to move and navigate. They did it 2 years ago to get 21 points on maybe the best defense we've seen since 04 or 09 or 10. So, I think this is and he probably looks at this as, hey, this is one opportunity for us to get a win too, and do the same thing. Maybe they're not going to go to a bowl game, but at least what they can do is say, before they play Ohio State, that they can build some confidence and, and hey, and they look at Iowa as a rival, and I think Iowa looks at them as a rival, just no trophy involved. I always said that it should be like a paper bag, from the Oasis, they could play for that, here's a Cheetos bag, but it doesn't
Panda
need to have,
Express.
yeah, Panda Express.
The Panda Express trophy.
The overflowing garbage can, next to the Sbarro or the it was the Starbucks. It always seems to be like a bunch of coffee cups on the ground.
I know. Let's hit one more topic, Scott, here before we move on to our picks, which corrected themselves last week. I suck again. Oh, I suck again. Big picture, Big Ten stuff this week. Schedule for football next week. You wrote about kind of what the plan is here going forward once USC and UCLA come on in 24. Divisions again next year. Schedule's out now. Just kind of give people an overview of kind of where things are headed here.
Yeah, I was able to get that story for Monday. Just that divisions are here one more year. See you later, divisions after next year. That what happened was that
I think they should call them legend leaders just for old time's sake. For go out on a high note.
Absolutely, I agree. Let's do it. We can do it ourselves.
East and West. That's boring.
Yeah, right. Let's bring back legends and leaders, and we'll call the legends the West. But
Purdue on the schedule next year. Hated rival.
Yeah,
it actually is turning into that a little bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is some hate element to that. So the thing that makes it fun is that you look at the West Division is set up perfectly for Iowa, and not and it's because all of those teams except Purdue are on your border, and all of them you have huge histories with, and they're elements, organic elements that make it such a rich tradition. And then you also add in Penn State has gotten there, and you got to go there. Michigan State comes back, first time with fans since 2013. They did play in 20 at Kinnick, and and then Rutgers comes to town. That'll be great. But you look at that and you go, what it made sense for the Big Ten was that there were all kinds of different elements at play. There were some ADs in particular that were like, you know what, I don't want to just change it for 23 and then change it again for 24. Why don't we just unveil it all at once? And then there were then the other discussion was, well, how many protected rivals are we going to have? How often are we going to play them? That sort of thing. And some schools like Iowa wanted 3, other schools wanted 2, some didn't want any. So there was just this really weird, combination of things. And then the ADs got kind of antsy and said, hey, we need to get a schedule. We need to start building on this because our campus people want to get word out on homecoming and stuff like that. So then they said, okay, fine, let's just get it. Let's just do it. There were 6 locational switches, which is what prompted us to change anyway. But other than that, there were no game switches, no team switches like there were this year. It was just, let's just get it out and change the schedule, and we're done with it. So now in 24, and I'll say this, that there are a couple of things that could that are still remain to be seen. Number one, the second Black Friday game. There will be another one. We'll see a couple of Friday night games, Big Ten games. We'll also see potential for a Labor Day Saturday game or Sunday game. I'm sorry. Does Iowa figure in any of that? I don't know. As far as week 0 goes, there are no week 0s now. I don't know, that may be something that could end up happening in a later date for next year. But by and large,
it all depends on what TV wants.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to move some of that. And they want to have
excuse me.
Oh yeah, they want to have week 0. They love week 0 because it does have. I mean, like Nebraska, Northwestern had all kinds of different, avenues.
I don't like. I don't like it being called week 0.
Yeah,
just call it week 1.
Well, now if they could change it, they will. you know, you know. But
It's like when somebody says we don't have a medium soda, we have small, large, and extra large.
it's pretty true, though, isn't it? You go somewhere like a fast food restaurant, you get a small, and it's still like a Dixie cup, and then you ask for a medium, and it's like a old big gulp. It's like
like a barrel, an oil barrel.
I know. I'm like, I just want a medium. I'm like, holy cow! No wonder we all look like this. Um, but and then in 24, it hasn't been set yet, but the thought is that they're going to go to one single conference structure. Then it's about how many protected games each team has. That's the next part of the discussion. One area that, I know I've talked about a lot is everybody gets 3 protected teams. And then you can deem some of those series as permanent, some that aren't, because you'd be a fool if you thought that Michigan, Ohio State isn't going to play every year. But like Iowa has 3. Nebraska, Iowa is definitely going to happen. Minnesota and Iowa probably will happen. And if it's even at 3, there's not a guarantee that Iowa, Wisconsin will happen, but it could. But if you can put those all on ice, and then for the other teams in the league, it could be exciting. You could say, you know what? Let's have USC start off with a bang. Your protected rivals are UCLA, Penn State, and Ohio State for 4 years. And they'll be like, what? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, then we're going to do this. And so then they would play those 3 teams for a 4-year period. And then at the end of 4 years, okay, you're still going to play UCLA every year, but maybe we're going to have you play Michigan and Nebraska, or, maybe Wisconsin's good again. And, just do something like that. I think that makes sense. And then like for Penn State, you could say, yeah, we know you don't really care, but you're going to play Ohio State every year because that's turned into a heck of a series and it's great for TV. We're going to have you rotate every 4 years, Maryland and Rutgers. So that means you play them 6 times over 8 rather than one team all 8 years and the other team 4. And then, we'll leave it open. Maybe maybe you have a good series with USC, and we think that's going to be a fun one. Or Nebraska, maybe you're going to play UCLA because it's closer for maybe USC and UCLA, so it's close. I think that those possibilities to me make it interesting. So you could have a combination of like, say, 9 or 10 permanent rivalries and like 14 or 15 rotational permanent rivalries.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and how they incorporate 2 teams that are all the way out in the Western time zone and having to figure out start times and things like that for, the 3-hour difference between, a portion of your conference and then the all the way on the other side. So I will do this as a public service here for those that have not seen it. The 2023 schedule, Iowa plays host to Utah State to start, trip to Ames in week 2. Western Michigan comes to Kinnick for the final non-conference game. Conference play kicks off on Saturday, September the 23rd, as Scott said, out in State College. Michigan State at Iowa, Purdue at Iowa, trip to Madison in October, the middle of October, which we haven't seen in a while, and Minnesota the week after that comes to Iowa. So 2 Western Division opponents come to Iowa City. Iowa plays 2 Western Division opponents in October. November starts with a trip to Northwestern, then Rutgers in a weird November game at Kinnick, then Illinois at Kinnick, Friday at Nebraska. So very manageable schedule.
Yeah, I think so. I put together kind of a Big Ten post yesterday. I was kind of the lead on that. And probably the one game that stands out is because they wanted me to, okay, what's the best crossover game and all that stuff. I put Iowa Penn State because of all the feistiness from the last time and I saw that with my colleague Audrey Snyder when she wrote something. It was like, it's like we're not, September 23rd, 2023, our revenge. And it showed like one of the Iowa fans going, oh, like this. So yeah.
Is there a more disliked coach in the Big Ten than James Franklin?
The only one that's close is the one north of here.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
wears tight pants.
yeah. But I would say that
And
he is,
Roosevelt.
yeah, right. And remember, he's going to be the one if they win Floyd, he'll be the first one to the trophy.
Yeah, him and his tight pants.
He'll just be running out there, out sprinting his players, and to go grab Floyd, and he'll hold it above his head, and then he'll hand it off to the lineman. And they'll carry him off the field next to Floyd, and so just remember that, Iowa. When you go up there, that's what's waiting for you if you lose Floyd. So.
All right, Scott, I've put this off long enough. Let's hear the picks. Let's hear the last week's outcomes, and then we'll get into picking this week. And I will throw out my losers.
All right. Well, I last week I rebounded a little bit, and you regressed a tad. And you went 2-3. I went 3-2. The only one that we were split on was Maryland Northwestern. I took Northwestern in the 13.5, and you took the Mighty Terrapins. So
and that game was tied with like 2 or 3 minutes left, and then Maryland ripped off like a 75-yard touchdown run. So there you go, Iowa fans. There's a chance to get a 75-yard touchdown run.
Yeah, we'll see. I would be in favor of anything that's 75, involves 75 yards and a touchdown.
And you can guarantee I'll be on the wrong end of the field with my camera wherever the touchdown goes, because that's the way it happens.
Yeah, I know, but just focus on the audience, because you're going to see about 6 deaths.
People passing out.
You see,
Fred Sanford reaction.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Red Fox. Let's get out of here.
I had the Riley Moss fumble recovery touchdown in Illinois, and then it got wiped out. I was mad. I had all those shots. But anyway, nobody wants to hear my sorrows.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. We all have those ghost. I've joked about like personal ghost stories that evaporate. They're like a hologram of Tupac Shakur, where you have the story kind of written, and all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. And the biggest one for me in recent years was probably the first Field of Dreams game between the Yankees and the White Sox, where I had about 700 words written going into the 9th inning, all the pomp and circumstance of the day and how great it was. And then, of course, the 9th inning, I think the Yankees blast 3 home runs, and then Tim Anderson wins it on a home run. It's like, okay, everything I just wrote is now in the ash heap of history, but
best laid plans.
Yeah, but I didn't mind that much. It was kind of fun to write a game that interesting, which doesn't happen in baseball except every couple of decades.
No, they should wait a little longer to start the World Series.
Yeah. I mean,
start it in December.
Right. Let's we got Houston and Philadelphia. Yeah, we want snow in Philly for the World Series. Yeah, the whole start plan for that is stupid, isn't it? Let's just instead of waiting,
take all the momentum we built from the championship series and let it die out.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. You lost all the midweek. You lost. There's nothing going on. And they should have kicked it up. And started it earlier, and now you're waiting until Friday, and then it's then you're going against pro football. You're going against even college football on Saturday. You're going to kill your audience. I mean, it's still going to get decent numbers, but not like what it would be if it was, say, Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. But
not a well-run sport.
No, it's brutal. I'm all in favor of blowing it up. I'm not that way usually in most things, but how I would do it, Rob, and I love the old National League, the National League East that you and I grew up with you're in the Mets, the Cubs, and the Cardinals all playing each other.
The Phillies and the Pirates.
And the Expos.
Yep.
And they all had identities. So teams were pretty much the same year after year, and you hated players you respected them now, especially, but you hated them, and now do I care about the San Diego Padres or the Miami Marlins or no, not really. I think that now that the DH is universal, this is probably pretty crazy, but I would go 4 divisions of either 8 or 7 across the sport and do it by region. I would have like the East consist of Red Sox, Yankees, Mets, Orioles, Blue Jays, Nationals, maybe the Montreal team if they get one back or something. Have like a Midwest or Middle Park, which would be like Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Miami, if Tampa Bay and Atlanta or something like that. Then like Chicago school, just kind of bunch them that way in the Midwest. Because I think I could have more fun watching like the Cubs play the White Sox and the Twins and the Royals more than, again, some of the other teams. The division's fine. I don't mind the division right now, the Reds or the Pirates or whatever. But I just think that would probably, if you're going to get more Red Sox Mets series, I think people will be more interested than seeing the Mets. You can tell me this if I'm full of BS, but than see the Mets play the Giants even, and it's not like they left New York, 70 whatever it is.
They need a pitch clock too.
Yeah, right. Anyway, our old man rant of the day. Old dudes.
All right, let's hear let's throw the games out there that I'm going to pick wrong.
Okay, I've seen the number fluctuate. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but Illinois at Nebraska. Illinois at -7.5. Is that what you have?
Scott, I haven't had a chance to even look at the games yet, so I'll go with whatever you have. I think I remember seeing it at 7.5 earlier this week when I looked, which was probably Monday. So that's good enough for me.
All right. So Illinois is set -7.5 at Nebraska. Illinois has been off for a week. So is Nebraska for that matter. I'm going to go. I don't like the hook on this, and I'm not so sure that I even like the point spread. So I'm going to go with Nebraska at home. Illinois, I think, has been kind of fortunate that there have been some down teams, teams not playing well. I think they're better than they're better than what I expected, but they are, and I'm not saying Nebraska's good, but I just, on the road, a lot of people loving them right now. There's a chance for a little bit of a slip up here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm with you. Illinois' offense is not great. Good defensive team, kind of a grinder team. I think 7.5 is too much when you have an opponent a team like that. I think you're giving them too much credit for how how they're winning. So, and I think Nebraska's got some firepower on offense still. We'll be able to score a little bit on Illinois. I think Illinois probably wins the game, but that's too many points. So I'll take the points with the Big Red.
Yeah, exactly. Michigan State at Michigan -21.5.
Ooh.
That's a heavy number. I like the Wolverines to win, no question. But I also, this comes down to, do you think they're going to punish Sparty? Because they definitely want to. But do you think Sparty's up to the challenge of, hey, we're going to throw down and we're going to give you a game? And I kind of think that might be the case with Sparty. I'm going to go with Michigan State. I think Michigan wins, but I think Sparty covers.
That's at the Big House?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go with you on this one. 21.5 is just a lot in a rivalry game.
Yeah.
And I don't have a read on Michigan State, to be honest with you. It beats Wisconsin at home, gets crushed by Minnesota at home.
Yeah.
Just been an inconsistent team. But I think just emotionally in this one, the emotions and the effort will keep them within 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That's right. My compliment for Sparty this week. They could stay within 3 touchdowns.
Exactly. And, there'll be, 15 seconds left of the game. They're on the Michigan 5-yard line, trailing 41-14, and
punch it in
and get the extra point. And, voila, they lose 41-21. So, Rutgers at Minnesota, the Gophers giving up 14. This is interesting because the Gophers got crushed last week at Pennsylvania State. In the second half, more than anything. I think it was a competitive game in the first half.
Backup quarterback did not look good.
Right. You look. That's the thing I've been kind of telling people, about Iowa is, look, going up to Minnesota before the season, I thought Minnesota might win that game, but I'm not looking at Minnesota right now going, they're gonna get you. I think that
What's Tanner Morgan's status? Is he out this week again?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think, this machine I'm on right now might have some of those answers, but
Yeah, because it's a big difference. That kid who Iowa offered, I think. I don't know how to say his last
yeah,
name.
I know. Yeah, exactly. He's,
His
he's
brother
got
is a
three.
receiver, I think, up there.
Yeah, it's still, the fate's up to the medical staff, according
Okay.
to the most recent one. Um, so anyway, uh, I'm gonna go Rutgers. I think Minnesota wins, but I think Rutgers is tough enough defensively that it might be able to slow down Noah Abraham. The Gophers passing game doesn't get on track. I think it still wins, but that's a heavy number,
Yeah, this is a big number, and it's tough to know without Morgan playing.
Yeah. And
What to
Morgan,
expect.
he was 4-12 at Illinois, so it wasn't.
It's not. It's not the cavalry coming
No.
to save the day by any means, but at least he's a veteran that I think can help. But I'm gonna go with I'll go with Rutgers as well here. I don't think Minnesota's in a good place right now offensively, despite having arguably the best running back in the conference. But if he gets going and Rutgers can't contain him, they'll cover that 14 without a problem. I just think Rutgers can key on him without much of a passing game for Minnesota.
Yeah, right.
But I'm with you. I think the goal.
Yeah. Like Tanner Morgan is so inconsistent. He was 23 and 26 at Sparty, and I'm like, oh boy, and they only gave up the shutout in the last couple seconds. So I thought for sure that okay, this he's back to 2019, and then 4-12 at Illinois, and watching that game, wasn't very good. The game of the day. At Happy Valley, Ohio State minus 15.5 at Penn State. I'll let you go first on this one.
This is a tough one because I don't really feel like I have a decent read on Penn State this year either.
Yeah.
Got mauled at Michigan, but this will be a tough place. Obviously, one of the tougher places to play in the conference. I'm going to go with what I think is the superior team here, and I'm throwing the points with Ohio State because I think they're begging you to take Penn State here with that many points.
I'm there with you. I think, first of all, the real number should be how many over under and how many times we hear 7 Nation Army. But these two teams, I've been calling it the theme song of the Big Ten East for a while. But
is this the big noon game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because Michigan State's at night.
Okay.
So so it's big noon because of the World Series and stuff. I think, which really sucks because this is like one of those games I think should be at night. You should have a whiteout.
Yep.
At Ohio State, it's not that big of a deal, but at Happy Valley, it should be a whiteout. But watching them up close and even watching Illinois up close, the talent disparity is significant. I think Michigan's a very good team, and they're capable of beating an Ohio State on a good day. But Penn State is, I don't think they have it. I don't think they're as good. I think they're closer to the pack than they are to Ohio State and Michigan this year. So
one thing I've noticed with Penn State is the inability to kind of stretch the field. They don't have as good guys on the outside. They've got really good tight ends, and they're utilizing them well. And I like the young running backs a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
But I think Ohio State's going to be able to stack it against Penn State without having to worry about going over the top.
Yeah, I agree. Nick Singleton's great. He's going to be great in the league for a while. At worst, he'll be Miles Sanders. At best, he'll be close to Saquon Barkley. That's pretty heavy company. Drew Aller will be a great quarterback. Sean Clifford is serviceable. He's good. He's better than what we've seen here.
Poor man's Trace McSorley.
Yeah, I say he's kind of right. He's not as quick, that's for sure.
No.
I've called him the Andy Dalton of the Big Ten. So
yeah, that's a good comp.
Yeah. So I think Ohio State just they might give up some points. They might give up 20 points, but I think they can score in the 40s easily on these guys, and just they got too many weapons. And finally, the one we're covering, and the last, you could, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but Iowa minus 11.5. Is that still
I've
the
seen it
number?
kind of floating between that 10.5 and 11.5. So that's fine with me.
Okay. I've seen it move too, but even so,
I think it opened at 9.
uh, I think I could see it two different ways here. And this is just weird. I could see it being really, really close, competitive, and maybe Northwestern pulling out a win. Or I could see, kind of like Iowa in 2014, where it just said, all right, we're done with this. We've got to do something. And they have their breakout game. They score a ton of points. They win decisively. And so those are the polar opposites of how to pick this game. But because of
It's Iowa Northwestern. It's tough to get a read.
yeah, and I've never been able to do that. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with since I cover Iowa, I'm going to go with the risk averse strategy here. And I'm going to go with Northwestern 11.5 because I just don't know that Iowa can score enough points to have an 11.5 differential in points. Or, even if it was 10, I'd probably still pick the same thing. Because as we've said, this is the 8th time in a Fitzgerald-Ferentz matchup that Iowa's been a double-digit favorite. And Northwestern has won 6 outright and is covered every single time. So I'm going to go that route here too.
Yeah, I thought you'd take Iowa, but I'm with you. I'm going to take Northwestern. Just it's too many points with the Iowa's offense right now. Yeah. Maybe it'll prove me wrong on Saturday and have somewhat of a breakout on that side of the ball, or maybe the defense scores 3 touchdowns, which
right.
certainly I would not be surprised by.
Yeah.
But I throwing 11.5 points with an offense that hasn't scored a touchdown in its last 2 games to me is insanity.
I know everybody's betting on this breakout, and I understand it, and I could see it happening. And that's the problem. But then again, if Iowa could run the ball, I would probably be more apt to do that, and probably be more apt to lose it. Because then you'd say, oh well, yeah, they're not very good here, and you overlook this aspect, and then all of a sudden, it's typical Northwestern Iowa. So, I think it's probably going to be close. And but that said, what would be the ultimate juice cleanse for this offense is to get 100 rushing yards, no turnovers, and a long passing touchdown. If you can do that, it's like an enema, just gets out all the waste.
Yeah, that's unpleasant mental image for sure.
Sorry, I had to go.
But one that's needed here with what we've seen so far. 2:30 kickoff. If you haven't heard, that was moved from the earlier time before the season. So 2:30 at Kinnick Stadium, homecoming. Hopefully Iowa. I remember it was 90. It was 98, I think, Hayden's last year. We were in that old part of the stadium, and somebody from the DI, I can't remember who it was, Iowa squeaked out a win against Northwestern at home, and somebody asked him how it felt about getting that homecoming win at home. And Hayden goes, yeah, big homecoming win against Northwestern. And it just I think he was done at that point. And he was close to being done at that point.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of walk before you can run here. And I know that's a tired cliche, but really Iowa just needs to get a win this weekend and show some life on offense. I think those are the 2 objectives.
Yeah. And it's one of those that, I think what this team would love to see and what would be, is if they have a good win and Kirk is an emotional guy and go in the locker room and bawling his eyes out and sing an Iowa fight song for them, I think would be something that would really, be kind of a salve to this season at this point. And then you look at 4-4 and going forward, again, they are in the ballpark with the remaining 4 teams.
Yep.
Can they win 2? Yes. Can they win 3? Yes. Can they lose all 4? Yes. So it's just a matter of, you can't, to me, this one is the mandatory one. Because if you go 3-5 at this point, you're stretched it to say, yeah, I mean, they can still win those games, but there's no reason to believe it when you can't even beat a Northwestern. And then the rest of the month, this is the biggest problem Iowa would face then, is that it would drift from anger to apathy. And as a sports program, you never want that.
No.
You want them engaged. Yeah, you want them happy, but you'd rather have them mad than ignoring you, because basketball has had that issue that I don't think they've ever fully recovered to what they were 20 years ago at the end of the Davis, beginning of the Alford era. So I think that there were enough people that kind of started to tune them out, realized that they could live without Iowa basketball, that now are just casual fans instead of diehards. And you do not want to have that happen to football, because that you need that cash cow.
Yeah, no question. And you're playing for season ticket sales for next year too, as you finish out this season, and that's important. But they're sold out Saturday, 2:30 Central Time. Kinnick Stadium. Enjoy yourselves, everybody. Be safe. Be nice. Don't the booze don't help when you're at the stadium. They may help you and make you feel better for a few seconds, but it's not helping your team. So, yeah. Anything else, Scott, before we get out of here? I think we've gone long enough.
I think so. Let's just hope for some fun, because this has been a tough stretch for everybody.
Women's basketball, Scott will be there tomorrow night, exhibition game. He's a season ticket holder this year. His wife Meredith loves the Hawkeye women, and so he'll be out there tomorrow night. So if you're in the area and you're coming for football, check that out tomorrow night. The men play Monday night on Halloween against Truman State exhibition. These are both exhibitions. Jeff Horner brings his team back into town on Monday night. So a couple of chances to get your first look at the Iowa basketball teams this winter. Scott and I will talk more about that on the podcast once the season gets rolling here a little bit more. But football really is the main topic right now, and that's why we spent a lot of time on this. We didn't get to recruiting on this. There's been some more offers and things, and we'll get to that next week. I just felt like there was a lot on the plate this week that we needed to hit for football.
Yeah, I agree. It makes sense, and we'll see kind of what happens next week and beyond, and then we'll be ready for the grand finale, and whether or not Iowa's going bowling or going home. So.
Yep, we'll be back next week to talk about the Charlie Jones Tyrone Tracy Bowl down in West Lafayette. But thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Be safe. We'll talk to you guys next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.